Wow. Kobe Altman pulled off a truly impressive trade at the deadline, bringing DeAndre Hunter to Cleveland, which is a big win on multiple fronts. And we're going to discuss as many of them as I can possibly think of in this trade reaction podcast. Hi, I'm Zach, and welcome to the Sports Ethos Cleveland Cavaliers podcast, your safe space to celebrate and nerd out about the Cavs. And when I say nerd out, you know what I'm talking about. We're talking hoops backed by stats you've actually heard of. To join the discussion, use hashtag CavsCast on social media. And today, the Cavs traded for DeAndre Hunter. Now, a less humble podcaster might come on here and start doing victory laps. I will not. What I will do is start by giving you the details on the trade. So the Cavs get DeAndre Hunter, and Atlanta gets from Cleveland Karis LeVert, George Niang, 3 second-round picks, and 2 future pick swaps. Now, those swaps are reportedly in 2026 and 2028 that are already tied up in the Jazz deal that brought Donovan Mitchell to Cleveland. So if you care, the Hawks will have the right to swap the least favorable of the Cavs and Jazz in those years. So to put it simply, the Cavs are going to get the worst first round pick out of themselves, Utah, and Atlanta now in 2026 and 2028. That being said, my initial thoughts on this is that it's a home run. I've wanted DeAndre Hunter on this team for a couple of years now. He was the number one target that I had on my list dating back to the offseason. If you heard me on recent episodes talking with various people like Bob Schmidt from Fear the Fro, the Sports Ethos Hawks guys, Tim and Mikey, Justin Rowan from the Chase Down Pod, I talked about it on the Sports Ethos Trade Deadline show, the live stream this morning. This has been my guy. When I fire up 2K, the first thing I do is check in the trade finder for DeAndre Hunter. With how well he's played this season, I truly thought there was no way the Hawks would possibly move him, especially for any of what the Cavs could likely offer. Not only did they get him, they got him without having to give up their 2 most valuable future assets right now in Jalen Tyson and the 2031 first round pick. It sucks that George Niang, who was such a key piece of this locker room, seeing him leave hurts. This team has been incredibly high on vibes this year. And by all accounts, by people that would actually know, the Mikey McNuggets of the world, the Spin Davies of the world, George Niang, fantastic locker room guy. So that does suck. But on the basketball floor, this is a substantial upgrade, in my opinion. And as long as DeAndre Hunter can stay healthy, this is an absolute home run move by Kobe Altman. So let's dig a little bit deeper into it, shall we? We'll start with, what are the Cavs losing? What are they giving up on the floor in this deal? So Karis LeVert started the year out of his mind, but he has cooled off lately. And he's always had consistency questions and concerns. Still, this is not going to be a bash on Karis LeVert pod. It's definitely not going to be a bash on George Niang pod. LeVert was awesome for most of the year, and I personally root for the guy. He's a local guy. I like him. On the year, he's averaging 10 points a game, shooting 40% from 3. He had completely changed his shot diet to be more analytically friendly, and he's been great, not just in counting stats, but they've had a ridiculous 122 offensive rating and a 110.5 defensive rating when he's on the floor for a net of 11.6. That's 4th best on the team. However, it is worth noting that over his past 11 games, which is basically since the start of the new year, not basically, literally, since the start of the new year in the 11 games that he's played, his numbers have dropped substantially. He's averaging 7 points per game, shooting just 31% from the floor and 25% from three. The offensive rating has completely flipped on its head to 115 and a half with a 122.7 defensive rating. That's a net of negative 7.2, which is the worst on the team, barring like Imani Bates and JT Thor in their whatever it is. I actually didn't look up the number of minutes. It's nothing. It's of the guys that play and that suit up for the big team. It's the worst that it's the worst of any of them in that stretch. The career year he started off having is coming back down to earth. It's returning to reality in a major way. Now, with George Niang, he's been on a heater lately. He's up to 40% from three with over 4 attempts per game in just 20 minutes a night. On the season, they have a 118 offensive rating with him on the floor and under 111 defensive rating for a 7.6 net, which is surprisingly the lowest among real role players on the team, which just shows how ridiculously well the Cavs have actually been playing this year. His shooting trajectory, though, has been on an upswing. He's up to nearly 44% from three since the new year. However, they're a net negative 3.5 in his minutes. So while he's shooting it well, the contributions aren't resulting necessarily in winning basketball. And you can say, Zach, the whole team has been struggling more since the beginning of January. And I would say, sure, they have lost some games. But the main rotational players are still boasting ridiculously high net ratings, all things aside, outside of Niang and LeVert. I think Darius Garland was one of the worst ones at like a +8.5, but not Niang and LeVert. They've played more teams that are more likely to present some of the same challenges that they're going to likely face in the playoffs. And it's not the end all be all looking at the stats that I'm pulling up today, but they do represent a very simple way to look at how we could potentially expect the playoffs to go for them, particularly Niang, who, when he's been doing his best trait, shooting the ball, the team is losing with him out there. And that ain't necessarily good. So, again, I'm not intending to pile on these guys on their way out the door. I have nothing but appreciation for what they've done this season, truly being a part of making it one of the funnest years I've ever experienced following Cavs basketball. But the numbers are the numbers, and they do show that there were opportunities to improve the roster, which Kobe Altman clearly believes that they did. So in these guys' place, what are the Cavs getting? Well, they're getting a 6'8", 225-pound, big, versatile wing mold that the fan base, the national media, yours truly, has wanted them to add to the roster for quite some time now. He plays the 3 and the 4 consistently. And while you can argue over how great his defense is exactly, there are numbers that say, he's good. There are numbers that say, well, he's actually overrated, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to have that debate here, partly because I'm literally talking to the wall. But what he does do is take on the toughest assignments in the league, and he holds up at the very least. He balances this roster with his size, with versatility. And I'm going to be honest with you, I am salivating over the idea of lineups with him, Wade, Mobley, all on the court together with their length, their switchability, even in the zone, the ground that they could cover, just being long and big. I'm not, but they are. Imagine if you're watching this on YouTube, my arms are, I don't know, like a foot longer on each side. That's the kind of wingspan we're talking here. When when he's healthy and, when Wade is healthy, being able to essentially always have a Hunter or Wade option available, it seems euphoric compared to a guy like Niang in those minutes defensively. He's also more than capable as a scorer, not in the same way as Karis LeVert, but he's going to be able to replace the production lost by LeVert, while other guys like Ty Jerome get a chance to be elevated a little bit and replace some of that ball handling that Karis LeVert leaves behind. So I think it you feel pretty good about the 2-for-1 nature of this deal, in my opinion, with DeAndre Hunter being able to essentially make up for and add additional things, that we're losing without the other two, again, on the basketball court. This year, DeAndre Hunter has been a legit sixth man of the year candidate. FanDuel has his odds currently as second best behind Peyton Pritchard for that award at plus 200 when I checked it about an hour ago from recording this podcast. He's averaging 19 points per game in under 29 minutes, shooting 46 from the floor, 39 from three, and 86 from the line. He takes threes at volume, putting up nearly 7 a game. And he's not a massive rebounder, but he does grab 4 a game from a wing position on a team currently that has several plus rebounders on it. So that's fine. If when you think about the debate that went on for a lot of the day today was Cam Johnson or DeAndre Hunter. I think you probably feel a little bit better about DeAndre Hunter helping on the glass than you do Cam Johnson. In short, to me, this is a real difference maker, potentially, for this team. He also aligns with the timeline of the core. He's 27 years old. He's in his 6th year in the league. If you remember back, he was the 4th pick in the 2019 draft. So he's a year younger than Donovan Mitchell. He's the same age as Jarrett Allen. So age-wise, he fits perfectly into the core group. He's also on a similar, a little bit higher contract to a guy like Jarrett Allen. He's making a little bit more at $21.6 million this year. That's going to scale up to just shy of $25 million in its final year in 2027. That's the same year that Donovan Mitchell's contract could be up if he declines his player option in 2028. So from a contract length standpoint and an age, he fits kind of perfectly into the timeline for this core in pretty much in all ways. And while I mentioned losing a locker room guy like George Niang is definitely going to hurt overall, it is interesting that DeAndre Hunter comes in with some familiar ties. No? Get it? Well, he and Ty Jerome were teammates in college at Virginia. They won a national championship together in 2019, playing at Virginia, whose nickname is the Cavaliers. I'm just saying it might be fate. It also might be imperative this summer between being college teammates with DeAndre Hunter and childhood teammates with Donovan Mitchell. Ty Jerome is probably a must sign this offseason. Just throwing that out there, Kobe, if you happen to tune into this particular podcast, I'm thinking that one's going to have to get done. So I mentioned the contracts lining up, with the core. There's also another major financial benefit in this move. By making this trade, the Cavs were actually able to dip under the luxury tax line for this season. The reports that I'm seeing have them about 1.5 million below the luxury tax. And they got to take a swing on a legitimate upgrade to a real position of need while also avoiding the luxury tax this year. Take a bow, Kobe Altman. Now, they are going to need to fill in a spot on the roster, but based on the math that I stole from Bob from Fear the Fro, they should have the wiggle room needed to sign a basically an unencumbered veteran minimum for the rest of the season while still staying below the tax line. That opens up potential buyout guys to perhaps address that third big upgrade over Tristan Thompson if that's how they choose to use that roster spot, because they're going to have to fill that roster spot with someone. And so the buyout market could be pretty interesting. You've heard names already like, potentially Ben Simmons, maybe Daniel Tice. I saw Clint Capella thrown into a tweet by someone. I would personally be kind of surprised if he got bought out. But at this point, I mean, Luka Doncic plays for the Lakers now. So nothing that happens in the NBA should really shock anyone. But beyond this year, they were headed for the second apron next year if they brought their own guys back, and that hasn't changed. So basically, when you really boil it down, they destined themselves for the second apron next year back in the offseason when they signed the extensions that they did. When they locked up the core four, like the second apron next year was basically a foregone conclusion unless they really, really gutted things around them. So this was really their last opportunity to take a swing like this, to really get a guy that could meaningfully upgrade the roster without being impeded by the apron roster restrictions, particularly those in the second apron. Not being able to take back more money in any trade, not being able to aggregate players, frozen draft picks, all of that stuff that people are basically teams like I'm trying to think of who just did it recently. Well, the Bucks. The Bucks made their move for Kyle Kuzma to get under the second apron line so that they could open up some other possibilities and avoid some of those penalties. So on the finance side of things, it really is a big wing. Yeah, they got a big wing, and they also got a big win to be able to make a difference with that big wing while actually improving the financial books for this season. So when I say a big difference, when you bring in a guy like DeAndre Hunter, I feel a little bit silly asking this question, but one of the first things that popped into my head, and it's playing off of a conversation that Justin and I were having earlier this week on the pod, is by adding in DeAndre Hunter, if they were to just insert him into the starting five, like, is that the best starting five in the NBA? Assuming for a second, like, things like chemistry and roles don't even exist, they don't matter. If we just plugged DeAndre Hunter into that starting lineup with the core four, how many teams could say 1 through 5, they have it better than the Cavs? Boston, Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kristaps Porzingis. That's probably a talent for talent slightly above the Cavs. But the Cavs are still super deep even after this move, and the Celtics are less so, in my opinion. So, that there's some better balancing, and when you're talking about that matchup, having a guy like DeAndre Hunter could be a real difference maker for the Cavs side. Anyways, who else? The Thunder, SGA. Whether it's Caruso or Dort, with J-Dub and Chet and Hartenstein, obviously assuming health, with the reports that Chet is eyeing a return here very, very soon. So them maybe, possibly, but I think the Cavs actually might clear them. If you look at this on paper and think, well, let's do a draft between the two teams, like, what SGA goes 1, but then, like, how many Cavs do you take before you get down to the next Thunder player and, back and forth? I think probably going in those first 2 through 6, there's probably more Cavs guys that you would take, and I think the Thunder might have the bottom 2. So, you know, I think the Cavs might actually have a better starting five or a better five-man group, whether it starts or not. We'll get into that in a second. Um, than them. I mean, Denver has the idea of one, but Christian Brown, he's not even starting now. They put Westbrook in there, and Westbrook at this point in time, this is a stupid exercise and highly subjective. All I'm saying is that the talent level at each position in a five-man group that has Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, DeAndre Hunter, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen in it, that's very, very high level play at each of those positions all at one time. And putting the Cavs in a conversation again, 1 through 5, that you would not have expected to put them in when you were coming into this season. But is that five-man group even the group that should start after this trade? While DeAndre Hunter was really good in the 4 games that he started this year for the Hawks, he averaged 20 a game in those games. He shot 48% from 3 on over 7 a game. The Hawks have primarily played him off the bench. And even with Jalen Johnson going out for the season, and I asked the Sports Ethos Hawks guys, like, why wasn't he starting this year? And I thought it was really interesting what they had to say. And it pretty much was all built around keeping him healthy. They said once he gets over that, 28, 29 minutes and gets, 30 plus, that's when his knee starts to swell up and he starts experiencing those issues. By keeping him under 30 and coming off the bench, he's found a really good rhythm and a good role and been more available and been healthier. The Cavs could follow that same model, and it might actually be best if they do. Max Strus, when he's been starting, has been a really, really incredible fit by the numbers, both with the core and just throughout the rest of the game when he starts. So with the core 4, the Cavs have a 122 offensive rating and a 94.4 defensive rating for a ridiculous 27.7 net rating when Max Strus is playing with the core 4. As a starter, they've had a near 128 offensive rating with him on the floor throughout the game and a 110.6 defensive rating. That's a 17.2 net. It's a small sample size, but he brings such a unique level of dynamic spacing that few guys on the team, hell, in the league for that matter, are truly capable of doing. The Cavs might truly be in an amazing position to keep Max Strus in the starting lineup where he's been insanely effective and keep Hunter in the role that he's been playing out of his mind in for Atlanta. And that's a conversation, again, piggybacking off a little bit of earlier this week when I was talking to Justin Rowan from the Chase Down pod. He mentioned if they were to trade for Cam Johnson, would they potentially bring him off the bench and keep Strus in the starting 5 for a lot of the same reasons? And that, while I think valid, would be a little bit more of probably a tougher sell for Cam Johnson, who's been kind of the guy in Brooklyn this year. Not that they're trying to win games or anything, but bringing him in and then telling him you're going to change his role might be a little bit more difficult to do than with a guy like DeAndre Hunter, who's been playing in that role, and it might actually help his transition into the lineup go smoother than it would be if he was used to starting. And this could give Kenny more lineup options available to him. It could give him a chance to be more of a scorer in second units. Honestly, the more that I've thought about it, the more I think it makes a ton of sense to do that. You still want him to play minutes with the core 4, I think, because his size and his skill set project as a perfect complement to those guys. But why go away from a formula that's been working for him this year? And with Strus, how well he's been playing with them for the Cavs this year. Granted, with the Cavs' depth, like nobody is playing a ton of minutes, so he could start and still not play more than 28 minutes a night, but he doesn't have to. After all, the most important thing isn't who starts, it's who finishes. And having options that Kenny Atkinson can go to that include DeAndre Hunter in those closing groups, that could be the true difference maker in these high profile matchups like the Celtics, like the Thunder. Again, I'm stealing from Bob from Fear of the Fro, but he had this amazing graphic in his podcast with Mikey McNuggets earlier this week about the defensive assignments that DeAndre Hunter has taken in his career. And he has spent so much time guarding literally the best wing players in the NBA. He has that level of experience. And so when people say, "Oh, he's not the defensive numbers aren't that great." He's doing the defensive numbers he has while getting the worst guy to have to try to keep in check. And that's a piece that the Cavs have been missing, you know, especially when Dean Wade is not available. Am I worried about DeAndre Hunter staying healthy? Yes. Yes, I am. But I'm not as worried because of the price that the Cavs actually paid to get him. If they had to give up the farm, if they had to throw in the 2031 first round pick, if they had to throw in Jalen Tyson, I would be excited, but also very nervous. Going all in on a guy who has had injury concerns throughout his season is a risk, but they didn't go all in. They gave up a guy. Again, this is on paper. This is not about the human beings that they actually are, because I do want to make a point to say right now, Karis LeVert and George Niang, by all accounts that I'm aware of, not knowing them personally, are really, really good dudes. And now they have to move. They did not get a choice in the matter. They are packing their bags and they're heading to Atlanta. And on a human level, that is difficult. And that is not lost on me. But on paper, for the X's and O's of the basketball team, they gave up a guy on an expiring deal that you weren't sure whether you were going to re-sign him this offseason. I think you expected you probably would if it got there, but it was not a foregone conclusion. And you gave up a great locker room presence. According to Mikey McNuggets, literally the linchpin of the locker room. But a flawed player with a questionable role when the games matter. And second round picks and swaps that you were already swapping. Now, second round picks, swaps, even if you're already swapping them, under the new CBA, those are both valuable currency. But you know what I value more than second round picks and future swaps that you're already swapping? Championships. And this move, if DeAndre Hunter is healthy, makes the Cavs a more legit title contender this year than they were yesterday. He's also 27 years old and locked up on the same timeline as your core. So you take your swing for a title this year, and you're still set up to try to compete for titles in the following couple of seasons. And if you're planning beyond that window, you're setting yourself up for failure. So much can change in a 3 to 5 year period in the NBA. And what this move does is makes this 3-year window one that has a better chance to hang a banner, or more than one if you're feeling particularly greedy as a fan, than you had yesterday. And that is a hell of a trade, if you ask me. If you made it to the end of this podcast, please leave a like. If you're on YouTube, rate the show 5 stars on the podcast app that you're using right now. It would go so far in showing the evil algorithm that we're worthy of, being shown to people. It would also make me feel nice to see you actually enjoying this thing. Also, if you are watching on YouTube, what do you think of the trade? Let me know in the comment section. Now that the episode is over, go ahead and open your app store and download the Sports Ethos app. One of the best blurb feeds in the business. Cavs players are on there, fantasy tools, a lot of news updates. It's all there on the Sports Ethos app. As always, I'm Zach. Thanks for nerding out with me, Cavs fans.